Creating a new product involves identifying the needs for the product, who our customer is, what features of the product we're going to develop, what the ultimate goal is, and so much more. And AI is changing the pace of how we can do some of these things. Artificial intelligence is being used more and more in a number of parts of product management work, product innovation work. And we're going to get into that with a practitioner about how indeed AI is being used. First, I am recording this interview at the Inspire Innovation Conference hosted by PDMA. That's the Product Development and Management Association. They are a professional association of people who are really driving innovation in the best companies around the world. People with enormous knowledge, skills, and experience in innovation. It's also the oldest running professional association for us product people. Since 1976, they have been researching and curating the body of knowledge. It's also an association I've been involved with now for about 2 decades and have been contributing in a number of ways, including most recently being the co-author on the 3rd edition of PDMA's Body of Knowledge for Product Innovators, a great resource. If you want to find out more about what this organization does, simply go to pdma.org.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Thanks for joining us, and let's jump in learning about how AI can be applied to our work as product managers and innovators. With us is Brian Cullard. He has been providing 15 years of experience in managing strategic project portfolios for global organizations. He's also has proven success across multiple industries, including finance, healthcare, and technology. Brian holds a degree in engineering, an advanced degree in business, and also the co-founder of the PDMA chapter. There are local chapters in some cities around the United States, and there's been one here where we are in St. Louis, Missouri at the conference for a number of years, which you helped put together.
Yeah.
We're going to dive in and learn about this AI thing that's going on. And it's interesting, we had talked earlier about maybe doing one slice of where AI lives.
Right.
And you said, I'm up for talking about just kind of how product people are using it. So I don't know where you want to start with that, but I'd like to get some information about maybe some examples of how you're seeing it used, or where it kind of first lands.
So yeah, even before we begin, I just want to throw out a quick disclaimer, right? So we're going to be talking about large language models, artificial intelligence, and a lot of organizations are kind of exploring it. So because these large language models do use these inputs for training of future models, that you want to check with the organization's policies to make sure that you're in compliance with their security, to make sure the data usage is being used correctly, and also with any sensitive data, just to use your own best judgment, because you don't want to put any sensitive data out there that could be ultimately used.
Yeah, absolutely. So a good PSA there.
Yeah.
Caution for don't just go throwing your information into a model without knowing how it might be available to other people. So
right.
We have ran into this issue a little bit.
Sure. Well, you mentioned artificial intelligence, right? And there's so many different terms that are being used in the industry right now. So you've got artificial intelligence, and the way I tend to think about it is, how long has the technology been around? So a great framework is to use email, actually, of all the silly things, right? So email's been around for a long while, and there's different tags. How do you keep out spam from coming into your email, right? And there's different filters, right? And that's a form of artificial intelligence, right? And then you can go one layer deeper and talk about machine learning and test sets and training sets to how do you keep out further types of spam. And you can go one layer deeper than that, where you can talk about neural networks and saying, okay, now how do we look at the contextual language of emails? And the math is getting more and more complicated as you're going down into the rabbit hole. And then you finally get into this world of what we're experiencing now with ChatGPT, which is generative AI, right? So there's so much data that's been taken into these language models that they can actually generate the information for you. And then there's also, with large language models, there's just a small kernel of generative AI, because you now have these image generators, you have the sound generators as well. So when someone says, hey, this is going to be a great AI solution in the future, particularly with some of the technologies, and when they say like predictive modeling has been in Excel. Now the real question is, just because you used AI, how are you going to unlock that value from Excel into your new product development systems?
Absolutely. Yeah, it seems to be the all-purpose tool right now.
Yeah.
It's the big hammer in the room, and most organizations, there's someone in leadership saying, well, we need to add AI to what we're doing. Without it, we need to think through what this actually means.
Yeah.
Okay? For product people, right? So how do we go about generating that first idea? In my work, I'm a market-driven product person. I like talking to customers, observing customers, doing some kind of customer research.
Yep.
You get that information, understand what the problem is, and then we move from there.
Sure.
But we're seeing AI used across the spectrum in that kind of that product development life cycle.
Yeah.
Take us into it.
Sure,
what's being
absolutely.
done?
So let's talk about that, the first phases of the product development life cycle. You're talking about the discovery research. And yes, with the large language models, they can certainly generate content. They can certainly segment different industries for you, and also you can use traditional methods in your large language models, such as 𝐟𝐸, to come up with lots of ideas. But the large language model itself, it's a black box technique, right? If you put that in front of an executive, you say, hey, this machine came up with this idea for us. Maybe yes, maybe no, but you're on an intuitive thread at that point, right? So you never really want to remove humans, or you always want to keep humans in the loop on these things, right? So it's a great way to help augment, but I don't think it's going to be a great way to like just completely replace traditional research methods.
Right. So I know this is being done some, but we're not just going to ChatGPT and saying, I'm interested in serving new moms with young babies that are having challenges with sharing photos, right? Tell me what their needs are, right? We might get some information, might stimulate some ideas, might be useful for brainstorming, might help us think about what we need to investigate, but you're suggesting we should not just take that blindly, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So, and there's also so many different methods that you use it, and because there's different methods on which you could approach the moms with the pictures per se, of whether you want to take a jobs to be done format, or if you just want to say take a traditional format, or try to figure out uncovered needs format, all of them can work. But because the language models, the way that you process the prompts will be vastly different, right? So there's a framework I like to use, and it's really and it comes from data science. And it's a three-step simple formula, which is what is the input? Well, it's really the context. How are you going to process that context vis-a-vis these prompts? And thirdly, what is the output? So as a high-level example, with the input context, you want to feed context into the large language model, because without knowing more about the single moms, some of their needs, where they're looking at, you're going to get approximations like any person who doesn't necessarily know the industry, right? You're going to get a low-level intern who's new to it, and they're going to get their ideas. Well, obviously, if you want some of the better ideas of it, you're going to need to feed the model some of the context that you're looking for. And then the next step to create that scaffolding is, well, how do you start to process that? Like, who are the industry experts? How do they think about the problems, right? What are the typical processes that they use? What are the scaffolds that we should maybe follow from that? And then from there, you can now start to get the different outputs that figure out, all right, from these outputs, how do you create different documentation that you can put in front of your executives that can be a little bit more defensible and just straight up just saying, we use this black box technique.
Okay. So input, context, output.
Correct.
And maybe a specific example, doesn't have to be the mom sharing pictures of new babies. Maybe something you've worked on could be helpful to take us through this about where we saw AI showing up in a helpful way in that product lifecycle.
Yeah, absolutely. So where AI was certainly helpful was in generating the product briefs. Right. So, when we gave a talk about a year ago on how to generate the product brief, we talked to a few different companies, and they were saying, hey, when we try to figure out what is the new product development process, how do we expedite it? How do we use some of these processes? Large language models tend to be better in the fuzzy front end of the process, but once they get into the things like scoping, that's where they need to bring in some of the humans to have that contextual awareness, the deep market understanding. But still, they're seeing efficiency gains around 50% around that. And they could, and that's kind of a broad brush stroke, because when it comes to generate the content, that can be done pretty quickly. But once you go through the refinement and the rough draft process, that's by rule of thumb, it's around 50%. But with that efficiency gains, they're now getting more product, they can generate more product briefs, and with that efficiency gain. So it's not only just are they getting the efficiency, but it's the number that they can put out at the same time.
Okay, so more iterations to refine that, and also a greater number of just different types of product briefs, helping us decide what to do next.
Correct.
Let's talk about a product brief briefly.
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's define that.
Kind of this vision of what the product's going to be.
Yep.
It's something you're sharing internally to collaborate. What goes into a product brief?
Sure. So just to define that real quickly. So a product brief is basically a high-level document, summarizes a solution to a problem that the organization is trying to solve for a particular market, right? And there's a lot of information that goes into the product brief, right? So the product brief is really kind of the capstone documents, that collaboration document that sets the vision for the product development team. But again, that's supported by a lot of market research, the business case, the how do they come to the solution that they're trying to solve, or the solution for the problem that they're trying to solve ultimately. So that the documentation, the support documentation that's required there, whether you're trying to do a pestle analysis, the Porter 5 forces analysis, what's really good is that you can use some of these tools out there. So we have the large language models, but there's also a great tool out there called perplexity.ai. And the reason why I want to bring that up now is because Perplexity AI does something that the large language models does not, and that is remove hallucinations for you. So let's talk about hallucinations and what are hallucinations, right? So
I have never experimented with mushrooms, just
right.
But
for sure.
It's a thing. I'm interested, I have to say, but
okay. Yeah, I've never done peyote.
And AI hallucinations.
Right. So when you're working with a large language model, if you put in the cat sat on a, some people will say hat, some people will say chair, right? And there is a large meta parameter that is called temperature. And that the way that temperature is set is about the randomness of the output that it puts in. So these hallucinations are actually, in fact, the problem of the large language models, because sometimes you want to have a variety of output and sometimes not so much, right? So if you're always looking for the cat's head on the hat, you would have a temperature of 0. But if you wanted to have more creative output, you would set that temperature to higher. So when we interact with the large language models just in the chat window alone, we're not necessarily exposed to that. So when you're looking for things like what is the total addressable market size, what is the actual real information that you're looking, the large language models such as like Python or Claude, they'll go out and they'll try to approximate that answer for you, but what you're still at risk is the hallucinations to change that information. We've seen multiple times where OpenAI has provided reference on links that don't exist, right? Perplexity AI gets you around that. So
it's basic, a hallucination is made up information, basically, right?
Correct.
And the interesting thing from my understanding is we, as data scientists, we don't have a clear understanding of how that's happening some of the time.
Correct.
Right? Which is just fascinating, right? So the neural networks have got to a point where we can't actually trace everything back yet.
Right.
But, okay, so this is a big issue because we have to recognize AI isn't just, at times, if it's hallucinating, isn't just giving us what it knows. If it's just like a person, right? We tend to get asked a question, we want to respond. We'll make up something if we have to. Right. So, okay.
Right, and which is why, I mean, there's a great phrase out of the Geospatial Institute here in St. Louis that's been doing, they've used AI for many years, particularly on spatial analysis and things like this. They have a great trust and verify model, which is you trust what comes out of it, but always fact check.
Yeah, okay, very good. Okay, so we're going to the path of the product brief, and what kinds of things do we want in the product brief to communicate what this product is about?
Oh, certainly. So with the product brief, you've got strategic alignments, you've got market analysis, you've got the launch timeline, risk mitigations. And again, these are a lot of, it depends on the audience, right? So when it comes to the executives, you want to have all these components in there, right? The justifications. But when it's to the product team and you're in more of a digital situation, sometimes they just want, hey, just give me the cliff notes. What are the features? Why are we here? What's this product ultimately going to do? And then they're off to the races, right? So it depends on the audience as well.
Yeah, and the AI tools can be helpful to say, give me a pestle analysis, kind of the strategic landscape of a competitive industry, a specific product that might be entering the marketplace. Give us some information about that. Okay. How about an application of like how to draft a prompt in Perplexity for something useful for us, right?
Yes.
To maybe get started on an element of.
Sure. So we're right into the prompt management piece of things. So there's a lot of interesting development going on with prompt and prompt management. Prompts are starting to become what English is to us, which is why do we study English when we speak English already, right? It's to become better at it. right? So there's a lot of times when, well, we're writing prompts and the data scientists out there are starting to say, well, why do you need prompts? Because you can just have the AI judge its own prompt so it can then ask its own self better questions. Why do we study these things? It's to become better at prompts, right? So going down the prompt engineering routes, so you can basically go back to that same three-step formula that I was talking about earlier with what is the context, what is the processing, and what is the output. And the reason I mentioned that is because when most people interact with a large language model, they typically say, as an example, oh, give me a product idea in this particular space. There's been no context provided. So you can do something a little bit more advanced, which is called a chain of thought prompt. And a chain of thought prompt would be, I have a particular product idea. Here are 3 other product ideas. Now, based on this product idea, please give me another one. Right? So you're actually in line kind of feeding the machine a little bit more context, but that's in line. And then you can use another type of chain of thought prompt, which is logical reasoning. So if I have a particular market size and I'm trying to get a particular capture rate, how many sales do I need to get to break even, right? And you can provide it 3 examples of that following a simple back of the envelope math calculations and just say, hey, follow the same logic, now apply it into a different context of trying to set up a pizza store in your favorite neighborhood. Example, right? And that's a little bit more of an advanced prompt that one can do. And I think that's probably the best method, honestly. You can short circuit that chain of thought process, and this has been shown in research from Microsoft and from Meta, which is you can simply put the words in, think step by step. And they've found similar results, but I tend to prefer the longer, this is the exact logic that I'm looking for, please follow this type of logic, because again, these large language models are in a black box, right? One of the things that they struggle with is the physical reality. There was this great TED Talk not too long ago where this woman said, hey, I'm looking for a measure of 6 liters. In front of me are 3 jugs. There's a 2-liter jug, a 6-liter jug, and a 10-liter jug. How do I get my mom a measure of 6 liters? And the AI would pump out all these weird, like, oh, first you get the first jug, and you pour it into the third one from the third one, and it was doing all this weird stuff. And eventually what the scientists found out was it was tripping up on the word measure, because it was taking the word measure as a process instead of just saying, oh, we just need a measurement. Right? So from that, just if you add the things like consider the built environment, respond to this question as if you're trying to find the shortest path to the quickest solution, those types of things would actually help you have better output than just say, hey, solve this problem for me, because sometimes the black box LLM doesn't know what it's doing. Okay. So bringing all this back to the product brief.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, bringing all this back into the product brief.
Capture no, because I want to ask you something.
Sure, absolutely. So
let's go to the product brief.
Yeah, so bringing all this back into the product brief, when it comes to things like trying to find the real-time information, which isn't going to be in the large language models, that's a great time to use the Perplexity.ai, because it can bring in real-time information, and it can cite the sources for you, like the Bureau of Labor Statistics right there versus the training data for Claude or OpenAI. It's going to be, it'll stop once the training data is set. And I think with the new language model that just dropped for OpenAI, that is up to October of 2023. So if you're looking for more recent census data than that, then you're going to have to go use Perplexity.ai. But sorry, I'm getting a little long-winded here, but bringing this back to the market research techniques, right? Yes, you would use the Perplexity for the real-time information. For the open models, that is really great for persona generation, right? So if you said, hey, I want to launch a new, we'll say ice cream, right? Or a flavor, and I would say, okay, given the statistics, what is the context that people would say it's time to get an ice cream? What are the different personas for it? And you can actually map out even from the personas into needs document, requirements document. As a single mom who's trying to find a quick solution to satisfy my kids, under which context would I want to find the new ice cream? So you can start to build these types of personas and solutions back into the support documentation that would go into the product brief.
Okay, so one of my takeaways as I've been processing what you said is anytime we're looking at something that we could research existing information, and that could be talking to someone who has the knowledge, that seems like a ripe area to experiment, at least with the AI tools, and see what we can get out. Certainly doing like the SWOT analysis, still things that should be available in databases that if we're asking right and they have access to the information, might pull it together for us. And I say might because we still want to, as you said, trust and verify, right? To make sure we validate what it's telling us. And so those are good opportunities for saving us time and collecting information. The other thing that came up as you're talking about this was the idea of Delphi gets used sometimes with products that are new in a category that the world hasn't really seen yet. We don't have people that have experience. We can't compare it with a benchmark. And so maybe there's a few experts out there in the world that we can at least get them to share their insights about where might this go in the next few years, right? And to try to pull that together. And I thought, as you were talking about that, like, oh, maybe I could use Perplexity chatbot as kind of my augmented Delphi panelist. So in Delphi, I might be just emailing out to my experts the context. Here's what I need your feedback on. What do you think? And we synthesize that, get that back in. I could also send that out then to my AI chatbot and say, okay, you're also a panelist contributing to this. How do you look at this information? How do you synthesize it? Is there anything missing that you would add? And not that we're going to blindly trust that, but again, it's another brainstorming in a sense, add some new ideas, see if there's something that maybe we missed.
And I think you're right. I think you're spot on, because not only is there like the synthetic data approach for how would a synthetic persona respond, and does that actually respond in the same way that your customers actually are responding? And then once you get those two to mirror up, how do you tweak that so then you can actually have a reduction in costs yet still get the same type of information out of it? Now, are you going to stop talking to your customers altogether? Absolutely not, right? Not. But you still want to, because to me, you still want to have that empathy and saying, hey, are we? But if you're trying to iterate on something that's already tried and true, then you know, as a prototype for intuition, there's certainly advantages on the synthetic side.
Okay. For product documentation, have you seen this put to use to help us save time and some of the tedious work that can come with documentation?
So yes, I've seen this put to use at a few companies, and again, as I mentioned earlier, they've been seeing about 50% improvement in the generation or the efficiencies. And what they're starting to do now is they're trying to automate that process. So once they have their processing and their prompts, and now it's for them, it's about scoring, and from scoring to the criteria that they're looking for their documents. And then once that scoring criteria is built in, they're now starting to iterate on that. So instead of just reviewing one product brief, they can review multiple.
Okay. And this all just seems to be advancing rather quickly.
Yes.
Right? If we were talking a year ago, we would have less use cases, and we would probably feel a little, it helps some of the time, but frankly, sometimes it's more of a waste of our time to try to figure out the prompts.
Exactly.
But just a year later, that has advanced a lot. My challenge is just the little things that I play with, right? By no means an AI expert at all, but just trying to play as a practitioner, using some, and with my academic hat on as a university professor, I'm typically using it for brainstorming more than anything, right? Give me some ideas about this sort of thing.
Right.
The two things I found helpful, and so I want to get your feedback on what else is helpful, is the context you mentioned. I always try to put it in a role and tell it what the context is and what role you're playing. And I'm starting to think more in terms of the AI chatbot being a AI employee, an AI companion, right? We're working on this together. Right. So I found context is pretty important. And sometimes I get frustrated because there's like little word differences I try that seem to make a kind of significant difference, and I'm trying to figure that out still. And the other thing I found out that is really helpful, for a while I was trying to write one prompt to get everything done. Right? I would give it context, write my prompt, and then I went to, well, let's give it context, write it one thing. And some of the tools I've been using Claude more than anything, use OpenAI, ChatGPT a lot as well, more Perplexity. Claude will do a very nice job of saying, okay, here's what I understand that you want me to do. What's the next kind of step, right? And I've gotten much better results out of treating it as a conversation as opposed to a prompt.
Correct.
And so my long prompt might be now like 7 things I'm asking it, and I'm seeing what it tells me each time. Like, okay, I need to tweak my next prompt a little bit, right, and go from there. that has made a huge difference. And it kind of aligns with what you talked about, the step-by-step logic approach, right? Other tips, those might be wrong, right? My
No, not at all.
Other tips on prompting just to help?
Sure. So you're mentioning, I don't know if you have the pro version with Claude
Yeah.
or so one of the great things, prompting, you can always ask the AI model, how would you improve this prompt?
Right.
NASA used to create those super long prompts, and they're extremely detailed. And the interesting thing that's coming out of what I've been seeing is, just like humans, the AI tends to remember what's at the beginning of the prompt and what's at the end of the prompt. There's this whole lost in the middle
We
part.
do that.
Right. It's just like if my wife tells me to, hey, nice to see you, can you do the dishes? And can you go say hello to your daughter? Then dishes? What dishes? I don't remember. So the whole lost in the middle component to
And
it.
one's more fun than the other one.
Exactly. But when it comes to, so having shorter prompts, and also if you prime in line, if you will, to provide the context, having shorter. So you were talking about having the ideation sessions earlier. So if you just say, hey, to start off the conversation, I usually start off with like a series of 9 prompts when I'm trying to do a product analysis for a company. Instead of just saying, hey, tell me about this one company, who works at this company, who are their competitors, where do they work at, what are the industry dynamics, so then I can feed it, so it can actually, I can feed all the different points out of it, so it won't forget the different ones, and that all becomes context for later on. But you were talking, and I believe there was something you were talking about that went on to like workflows, and I'm a little bit, when you're talking about the processing, the processing
Yeah, and
side
just
of things.
kind of implying a step-by-step.
Yeah.
Because I'm asking the engine often to take this into account and give me this information, and et cetera. And I found a big difference between if I write that all up as one prompt and I simply take exactly the same text and I break it into chunks.
Right.
Right. And I get much better results in the breaking it into chunks.
Yep.
And it seems like it's, as you said, maybe it's emphasizing the first thing and the last thing, because in the small chunks, it seems to be working more carefully through.
Yep.
And I kind of took it for granted, like, well, it's a computer program, basically. It will obviously catch everything I want it to do, but results right now are telling me different things.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. That's right. So when it comes to the processing part, one thing that really helps is when you begin with the end in mind, right? So in creating some of these product briefs, it's what are when you're trying to figure out, okay, for like a pestle report, for example, obviously you have the political, the economical, social, what are what are the sections, what are the headers? And then you can actually, after you have your broken out prompts in, right? It's like, okay, well, how do you actually say, all right, from each section? So you have granular control. And the reason why you want to have that granular control is just to have something that's a little bit more defensible in front of the executive and just saying, hey, it generated this whole thing, because otherwise we just get this meh, right? So having the individual context broken out, you have more to judge with. And there's a tool that I use. It's called Superpower GPT. It's only available as a Chrome browser on OpenAI. But one of the reasons why I like it is that allows you to do prompt chains, right? So while there's a lot of prompts and prompt techniques out there, if there's a series of like if there's 7 prompts that you ask all the time, so for example, when doing company research, and we just talked about the different ways to break down or to provide context at the beginning, all I have to do is just simply switch out the company name, hit return, and then it'll run the 11 prompts for me. And then after that, I can just say, okay, now hit the next 11 prompts that I want for a pestle analysis. From here, right, and this became the generation for where and how you can do product briefs pretty quickly, is because if you can do that for one document, you can do that with multiple documents. Still, you want to have that trust and verify model in there, but then that becomes your rough draft and a good starting place for your initial concepts.
Right. Okay. Really helpful. All kinds of places we can go these days on AI. This is a great start to understand how it can help us with that product brief, how we can start thinking through our different places of the product development lifecycle, where we might use this to better understand the customer, maybe extend our thinking a little bit, help us to catch an area that we missed. It might identify something that has nothing to do with what we need to do, but then hopefully our brains are engaged and we're catching that information as well. So I'm going to ask you about an innovation quote in just a moment.
Sure.
So we've been talking about how to develop products fundamentally, right? And using artificial intelligence as an aid for that. This is one piece of the Product Mastery Now body of knowledge. As I am at the PDMA conference, there are these 7 knowledge areas that come from that body of knowledge. And I put that together in my own system called the Rapid Product Mastery experience, the RPM experience, which is how to learn all 7 knowledge areas. And so these slices that we talk about in each of the podcast episodes are all together in all 7 areas. And if you want to find out more about how to move towards product mastery, how to actually integrate these different 7 areas in your work to help you do a better job creating products your customers are going to love and help you do a better job leading your teams and making a bigger improvement on your organizations, simply go to productmasterynow.com/RPM. That's for the Rapid Product Mastery Experience, RPM, and you can find out more there. Okay, on to innovation quote. We do like our innovation quotes around here.
Yes.
What do you have for us, and tell us what it means to you?
Sure, certainly. So my innovation quote comes from Thomas Edison. Right? You've probably had this on your podcast before, which was simply, he says, "I haven't failed, I just found 10,000 ways the product hasn't worked yet." Right? So
And
for
the
me,
light bulb example.
exactly, yes, the old light bulb example. And the reason why this resonates with me right now is because we're studying AI to do all these, a lot of experiments, to do the ideation, to figure out where and how different product ideas can come up with, and not all of them are going to hit. Right, so it's still going to, and it's going to iterate on itself. So right now, we're still going to be in the trust and verify model, but I think having the AI and this agentic workflow and this repetitive self-building workflow is going to be the sign of the times.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great quote. It is that example that in innovation, we're always doing something new, which means we have to learn something in the process. We're going to fail along the way, right? And Edison apparently was responding to a journalist about that, right? Like, are you frustrated with how not making the light bulb? Like, we've learned a lot of ways not to make a light bulb, which means we're closer to making a light bulb.
Right.
So pretty important. We're always learning for that. How can people find out about the work that you're doing, what you're involved in?
Oh, certainly. So I can be found at brian.collard@𝐬𝐵ASIS.com, and that's my direct email. And if there's something that wasn't covered on this podcast regarding artificial intelligence and new product development, I'm certainly open for a phone call. And we actually had a recent case study where I had a CTO of a Gartner-recognized decision analysis company come in, and they said, "We have 3 days to respond to our board on how we're going to use artificial intelligence in our industry." And because they're a rapid robotic process automation organization and decision analysis, AI was disrupting their entire business model. And we were able to provide a complete strategic pivot for them in 3 days. So if you're a $100 million manufacturing organization or less, certainly here to help you out and brainstorm new ideas.
Okay, so the small, medium manufacturing organizations?
Yep.
And the website again was?
It's at 𝐬𝐵ASIS.com. It's NOVAISYS.
AI, SYS.
Yeah, it's short for Innovation AI Systems.
Okay.
Yeah.
𝐬𝐵ASIS.com.
Yep.
Like it. Brian, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate the information on artificial intelligence applied to product management and innovation. And nice to see you at the conference.
Nice to see you too, Chad. Thank you so much for having me.
It has been fun to talk. And for listeners, if you want to find the article version of everything we discussed, that is at productmasterynow.com/510. As always, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.